He arrived with a squeaky trolley, a second-hand toolbox, and the kind of quiet that makes a house lean in to listen. Edmund Cole's house hadn't listened in years. It had been built to be looked at. Marble that never scuffed, glass that caught the morning like a fish in a net. People wrote about the art and the gardens and the man who owned both. They wrote less about the third-floor room where June Cole lay sleeping through 2 decades of birthdays and weather reports. 20 years earlier, a bad turn and a worse second had folded their lives in half. The papers said coma. Lawyers said prognosis. Edmund said nothing, and went to sit with his wife every afternoon at 4. The new maid, Marina, was hired in a hurry when Edmund's housekeeper retired. She was careful with her hands and careless with her thanks, which made Edmund like her. She had a son, Theo, 19, tall in the way boys are tall before their bones realize it. He came after school to help his mother, sweeping courtyards the wind would only litter again. He pushed in his earbuds and hummed while he worked. Sometimes he didn't press play, saving the battery, and hummed anyway. The first thing Theo fixed was a clock. It sat at the end of a shadowed corridor, its long case holding a heart that had given up. The brass pendulum rested at exactly 4:17, the minute the ambulance left the driveway 20 years ago. Theo opened the back like a surgeon lifting a rib. He cleaned, he oiled, he listened. When the pendulum breathed again, the house startled, as if a dreamer had turned in her sleep. He set it to the correct time and closed the case. He did not say there or you're welcome. He simply stood, still enough to hear the first small chime. Who told you to touch that? The question was a bark, but not a cruel one. Edmund had a talent for sounding like a headmaster from a book you admired. No one, sir. Theo's hands were still a little black with oil. It wanted to work. Edmund watched the boy the way old sailors watch a gust, measuring it. Things don't want, son. People do. Theo shrugged, on the edge of a smile. Then maybe someone did. Later, Edmund found himself telling June about the clock, about the boy with the careful chin and the scuffed trainers, about the chime he hadn't heard in years. He told her when the nurses changed, the sheets, and when the ward went to winter evenings too early. You would like him, he said to her sleeping face. He looks at broken things like they're just paused. Theo kept finding small paused things. A cassette player in a drawer with a sticky button. A shoebox of tapes labelled in a tidy hand. June, 1979. June, wedding list. June hums. He shouldn't have listened. But then, who was left to ask permission? On one tape, a woman laughed into the recorder, a laugh with a bell in it, and then hummed her way into a melody that forgot some of itself and didn't mind. Moon River, but missing a turn and finding another. Theo sat on the carpet of a room that hadn't been used in 20 years and let the sound of a stranger's happiness thread the dust. He took the cassette player to Marina. Mama, he said softly in the kitchen's late daylight. This is her. Marina took the headphones and closed her eyes. When she handed them back, her mouth was thin with some feeling that had too many names. Don't break your heart, she said to her son, which only ever means a heart has already accepted the terms. The next afternoon at 4, Edmund paused outside the hospital room because he could hear Theo's voice. He stepped in to find the boy sitting beside June's bed, the cassette player balanced on his knee. I didn't want to bother you, sir, Theo said, half rising. I found these. It's her singing. I thought. Edmund swallowed. Play it. So they did. The cheap headphones pressed against June's sleeping ears. The tape hissed. June's laugh stumbled out of old plastic. She hummed herself toward a river and across it, just like she had at 26 in a kitchen with bad lino and good sun. Edmund sat and listened to the echo of a time before money and machines had complicated the names of things. She liked that song, he said finally. I thought she might, Theo said. Sometimes bodies remember. My grandmother used to say the soul has pockets. For the first time in a long time, Edmund smiled without feeling guilty. What does it keep there? Crumbs, Theo said. Enough to find the way home. The nurses said not to expect anything because hope is a medicine that must be dosed. But they didn't forbid the tapes. So every afternoon at 4, the boy came with his squeaky trolley and his toolbox and a growing stack of cassettes. He fixed the cassette player twice more. He learned June's hums by heart. Edmund began to talk while the music played, his voice weaving between hiss and melody. He told the stories, married people forget to tell, a cheap motel in Cornwall with a seagull that stole a biscuit from his hand. A winter in Melbourne when June declared the sun a ridiculous show-off. The night they both misspelled aubergine on a dinner menu and decided to serve it anyway. I don't know if she can hear me, he said every time, which is what men say when they are very afraid they won't be forgiven if she can. Theo listened. He asked careful questions at the edges. He taught himself when to leave and when to stay. He smelled the hospital, antiseptic and coffee and loss, and began bringing small, lawful contraband, a sachet of dried lavender, a sprig of rosemary he crushed between his fingers to sweeten the air, a square of June's old quilt to tuck against her palm. He started opening the blinds just before Edmund arrived. Light is not medicine, but it behaves like it. On the 20th anniversary of the accident, the day on which the clock would have chimed 4:17, in a house that no longer believed in miracles, Theo asked his mother if he could tell the truth. "Not yet," Marina said, stirring soup with both hands as if the spoon were prayer. "The truth is heavy. Wait until he's ready to help carry it." When she finally said yes, it was raining in a kind, almost apologetic way. Theo walked into the hospital at 3:40 with the cassette player, the lavender sachet, the quilt square, and an envelope in Marina's handwriting. He placed the scent and the cloth where they belonged. He set the tape to pause. He stood in the doorway until Edmund noticed him. "Sir," he said, and then he said, "Edmund." He almost never used the man's first name. "I need to tell you something difficult, and then I need to show you something good." Edmund nodded once, the solemn nod of men who have acquired a portfolio of sorrows. "Go on." "My mother is your new maid," Theo began, and Edmund almost said, "I." No, but Theo's voice had changed around the word mother, so he held his breath. 20 years ago, she was a 19-year-old with a pram and a panic attack. She stalled her car by your gate. She got out to check the baby. Your wife came round the bend. She saw them. She chose the ditch over the pram. The rain seemed to grow louder, like the sky leaned in too. Edmund sat back as if someone had gently pushed him. He looked at June, who had not moved, whose lashes cast the same soft shadows they always cast. "The baby," he said. Theo swallowed. He didn't even cry. He just stared at the blue of the sky like it had told him a secret. He took a breath. "I am that baby." For a moment, Edmund saw a second, ghostly room behind the one he was in. In that room, June had never missed a birthday or the smell of fresh coffee. In this one, a young man held out an envelope with hands that shook. "My mother wrote you letters a dozen times," Theo said. "She never sent them. She kept us afloat with night shifts and stubbornness. When this job opened, she applied, and then we saw her picture. We knew. She wouldn't tell you, because she thought it would break you more. I asked to tell you today, because I think the truth is a key." Edmund looked down at the envelope. Marina's handwriting was careful and crowded, the script of someone who doesn't trust paper to hold what she needs it to hold. He did not open it. He reached across June to touch the back of Theo's hand. "Thank you," he said. 2 words that found their way down a hall. He hadn't walked in 20 years. "Let me try something else," Theo said, voice thin with hope. He pressed play. June's laugh fluttered into the room, followed by the wandering river. Theo leaned close to June's ear. "June," he whispered, using her name like a hand reaching into a well. "You don't know me. You saved me. You can rest if you want to. You already did the brave part. But if there's anything left, if there's one more crumb in the pocket, follow it home." Edmund, who had not cried in public since 1998, closed his eyes. He pictured the kitchen with bad lino, the early marriage where you think everything is a test and then discover it is a life. He pictured June putting a tape in a recorder and laughing at herself for being shy when no one was listening. Her hand moved. He almost missed it, a tremor, the ghost of a tremor. The idea that a tremor might apply for a job in her fingers. The nurse was there in an instant, the monitors suddenly opinionated. Edmund gripped the rail. Theo didn't breathe. The hand moved again, stronger, the sort of movement that belongs to the waking world, not to its shadows. "June," Edmund said, his voice cracking like old paint. "June, I'm here. I never left, darling." Her eyelids did the ridiculous, brave work of lifting. It took a century. It took a blink. Her eyes were the same particular blue they'd always been, the one he used to tease her about in the sun. She looked at the ceiling, the light, and then at him. She made a shape of the mouth that had 100 meanings across 3 decades and landed on the simplest. "Late," she whispered, a word barely there. "We're late." He laughed. He cried. He did both in the same sound. "Always," he said. The nurse called for a doctor, and the doctor called for a miracle by a name with Latin in it. Reporters would later write about neural pathways and the persistence of familiar stimuli. They would mention a diligent husband and a young man who believed old recordings could be maps. Edmund would let them. He would buy Theo a new cassette player and a first semester at university, and then, after the boy tried to refuse, a wrench set that would last him the rest of his life. When the house heard that June was coming home, it remembered how to be a house. The clock chimed 4 without apology. Marina came to clean the room that had been a shrine and would now be a room again. and she pressed the envelope into Edmund's hand. "Read it when you're ready," she said. He read it that night, after June slept, her breath making the quiet honest. The letter was not long. Marina thanked him for his kindness and confessed to the fear that had kept her silent. She wrote the same sentence twice. "Your wife is a brave woman." At the bottom, Theo had added a line in smaller script. "Some debts can be paid only in attention." Edmund stood, walked the house. He touched the clock. He listened to the chime and smiled when it landed on the right second. In the doorway, he found Theo, hovering the way boys hover when they are trying to invent a polite form of disappearing. "Stay," Edmund said, "and meant for supper. And for as long as it takes to cross whatever river we're given. And if a story must have a lesson to travel well among people with silver in their hair and memories like attics, let it be this. Sometimes the impossible is not thunder and light. It's a boy with a tape, an old song with the wrong notes, a truth carried carefully to the bedside at 4 o'clock, and a hand that answers in time."